Hey, this is Michael Lindsay from Vital MX. We're here with Justin Maxwell. He's the head of product marketing for Husqvarna worldwide. So let's talk about, we're here for a pretty cool event for the TE250i and TE300i launch. We're all the way up in British Columbia riding on a ski resort. You know, kind of spoiled for some of us down in US. I don't get to do a lot of true enduro riding. This is kind of what that model is, so it's a really cool opportunity to come up here. So let's talk about the I in these models. Everybody's throwing around the term fuel injection, but let's get into the gritty about it. It's not fuel injection in the terms of what we have on 4-strokes. This is port injection. Can you break it down a little bit for people to explain it?
Yeah, sure. So when we're looking at the Husqvarna with our TE250i, 300i, I standing for injection models, of course. Injection can be in both ways. It's a fuel injection as well as an oil injection system that we have. So we have two independent delivery systems of injecting the fuel and the oil, two separate systems which aren't mixed anymore like in 2-strokes in the past. And it's a different system than what you'll find on the 4-strokes, which fuel is introduced from your throttle body normally, whereas now we have it directly down in the transfer ports of a 2-stroke, a system we find works really well and keeps the genuine character of a 2-stroke alive and the same sort of power and liveliness that we're looking for.
I heard you guys talking a little bit about how long Injected projects have been going on with 2-strokes, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's been over 10 years. You guys had tried originally some bigger pump setup, like more of a direct injected setup, a couple other things. What did you guys try, and explain why we ended up at port injection out of all the designs possible?
Originally, basically, we had a few different direct injection designs, but they were in most cases very cumbersome, very complicated, and added a lot of weight to the bike. And this is not really what we look for in a character of a 2-stroke motorcycle. So while exploring further solutions, we found that, you know, by injecting down the transfer ports, it's sort of similar to what you would find of what a carburetor would do originally in the same delivery type system, and found that this was a very good and positive way to go forward, keeping the same character as the bike, not adding too much weight and complexity to the 2-stroke.
Yeah, because at this point, all we've really added, we've actually gone from a much more cumbersome carburetor. You've gone to a very small throttle body because you don't have the injector built into it. It just does a little bit of the oil spray. There's an oil tank on board. You got a feed tube down through the frame. And then even the hoses for the port injection system are pretty small, and a little fuel pump in the tank that isn't that far off like the fuel injection system in the 4-strokes, right?
Yeah, it's very similar to the fuel pump that you'll find in a 4-stroke model, so it's very similar to that. Everything's been neatly designed. The filler tube for the oil is included into the sensor tube of the frame, and just a small throttle body, which is just basically an air regulator as we're injecting the fuel directly down into the transfer port.
So the other cool thing is these were introduced in the new engine that you guys only introduced last year in the carbureted model, the new 215-300 with the counterbalancer. When you guys were in the design process of that engine, how much of this was in mind when you were already doing it versus the carburetor?
Basically, with the new fuel injection technology, we never had to really look into a completely different engine design. So the engine itself was designed more around shaft arrangements of last year, making it more rideable, reducing weight, and improving delivery of performance and rideability in certain areas. If you look at the new injected fuel stroke bikes, the intake, well, basically only thing that has changed is just to drill holes on the transfer port where the injectors can be positioned. Other than that, where some sensors will be located, the motor is identical. So you're running virtually the same exact motor with just a different fuel delivery system. So
the other cool thing, I heard you guys, you know, we've had fuel injection for 4-strokes now in motocross for going on 8 years, 10.
A couple,
10,
yeah.
10 actually. I think almost we're up to them all years. With some brands, but anyways, what's really interesting is how much, you know, you get fuel injection on 4-stroke. They don't think like a car like a lot of people think they do. They don't have that many variable options of what it can do. Now, it sounds like with this system's pretty smart between the fuel, throttle position, all the sensors on board, how much oil it gives. You know, it's not a stuck ratio. It's giving the perfect amount of oil for fuel ratio to what you're doing. It sounds like this system's a bit more intelligent than what you guys have on the 4-strokes, actually.
No, of course. I mean, on the fuel side of things, it's calculated in the same sort of way of what a 4-stroke would. But of course, you have the power valve that you have to factor in. So this is another area where the ECU has to accommodate the opening of a power valve, which obviously releases a lot more power and a lot more fuel has to be added at that time, whereas a 4-stroke would be a very linear type of power delivery. And secondly, of course, we're introducing oil at that period as well. So when we're introducing this, it's always measured according to the load that's on the engine, how much RPM you're at. So we're always varying the amounts of fluid in terms of fuel as well as oil going into the engine at any different scenario.
So there in Realty Park, like I said, now you're able to put straight pump gas in the bike. You've got the oil container separate. I think you guys threw out the number. The bike itself, in terms of fuel mileage, is around 40% improvement or so. But oil, how long can you go on an oil tank with a mix of basically fuel roughly?
Yeah, so we're much more improved in efficiency, not just in the fuel, but also in the oil. On a tank of oil, you'll roughly get about, well, not roughly, the minimum you'll get is probably 5 tanks of fuel. We're getting more or less up to 8 at times, so it's a much more efficient on oil. The average ratio you'll find is probably 80-1, but this varies at every different load on the engine. So depending on how much load you put in the engine under, it will deliver more oil, of course, under heavy loads, and less oil under less loads.
So, of course, the other byproduct of this entire system, and part of the reason why you guys designed it, is the upcoming regulations in Europe are getting extremely strict. Really neat thing I heard you guys talking about. I know it's not exactly guaranteed at this point, but it sounds very promising for the future of two-stroke technology, is these things are getting clean enough. It sounds like maybe down the road there might be a chance that we could see plated bikes in the US again, like we're getting they run that clean, basically, that could be an option down the road.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment we're focusing on what our European regulations came out with. The main focus was not just into regulation, it was also making the two-stroke more convenient, closer to the convenience of, or now to the same convenience as what you find on a four-stroke. For the US, of course, we have to look at it into the future, what we can do in terms of the different US regulations that are out there, but definitely a possibility and something that we're investigating and we'll look at into the future.